Hi, this is Carl, also known as Zarepath in the custom magic community, and today I wanted to go over 3 new decks that have kind of popped up in this first week before Netropolis rotates in the custom standard. So Netropolis is a set I designed that is just now rotating in the custom standard, um, and it's been interesting to watch people making decks. I've had lots of ideas of cool decks that could be made with my cards. But it's very interesting to see what other people decide to do and how they kind of interpret Netropolis and its cards and themes and how it interacts with the format and what ideas they come up with. And they're very cool. Um, so, just 3 decks that have kind of sparked my interest this last week that I've seen that are worth sharing, I think. This first one is called Scaling Factors. It's white-blue Scaling Factors. Um, and it's by CasualR. It's a credit for making this guy. It's just a very all-in deck, a tokens deck that uses a few different synergies to just, use scaling factors to just get out of control. So, Wondrous Incandescence is an enchantment from Hollows, an older set in custom standard that, makes your creatures bigger the more creatures you have, and it's just a classic go wide reward enchantment. The problem is it's a little inconsistent. Games where you don't draw it, those decks aren't so good. Netropolis brings in something that's kind of similar. It's Liberated Armory. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, it gets a weapon token attached to it. So a very different kind of thing, but it still rewards going wide and is a 3-mana enchantment. And so this kind of creates a little more redundancy. Then you have some synergies that work well, such as Skyguard Sovereign, also from Netropolis. This also rewards going wide as long as you can produce artifacts. And since Liberated Armory creates an artifact anytime a creature enters the battlefield, it kind of turns Liberated Armory into a Wondrous Incandescence. Also, it can be a 1-turn Wondrous Incandescence itself, just when you play it, because it is an artifact. Um, so those all combo together to create huge turns. Then you have things like Whoop Whoop Chef and Raise the Alarm, just to make lots of tokens out of 1 card. Epic of Hanaru can go even bigger with the amount of tokens that you make. Breaker of Cities is just a pretty good aggressive card that creates tokens. It creates them after combat, which isn't ideal, but it does help you create a wider board to take advantage of. And then Hovel the Rock, also from Hollows, has really cool synergy with Liberated Armory because it just gets huge and you can move those weapon tokens around to whoever you want. Like you could stack them all on your Skyguard Sovereign to get in, or just spread them across all your tokens so that none of them are free blocks for the opponent. Uh, and then Overgrowth Guardian is a 1-mana double trigger, particularly with Liberated Armory. Like this becomes a 1/2 that brings a 2/2 for 1 mana. Um, and then obviously it's enormous for your whole board with Wondrous Incandescence. Oh, and Vayne, I guess, is the only other card that just reliably creates a token every turn, just to make sure that you're hitting those creature drops. And if you are tapping a creature to crew your Breaker of Cities, you can untap that creature using Vayne's +1. So, a cool deck. I heard that one of the creatures was like a 76 in the game that was played. Very all in. I don't know if this survives various matchups, but probably a fun deck to pilot and to play. So that's the first of the 3 decks I wanted to look at. White-blue Scaling Factors. Did I save this deck? Okay, apparently. All right, another deck I wanted to look at was Bant Talia, Bant Flicker. There have been a few versions of this deck. I think the first that showed up in the deck building chat was from Soul Invictus, but I think others have also made versions. Occo made a version. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. There's just been a lot of different versions, but they're all based around the same premise. You're in Bant. and you're using Talia, the new planeswalker from Netropolis, to abuse her +1 ability to flicker your creatures every turn. You get a free flicker every turn as long as you can defend and protect Talia, and you just get absurd amounts of value. So let's look at the creature suite. This is a lot like the old Spirit decks that was very popular when Araloo first came into Custard, which, if you're not familiar, uses this Spirit mechanic where instead of paying the full cost of an Spirit creature, which is an enchantment creature always, you can make it cost less by exiling a creature you already have in play. This can't really be responded to, like you can't remove the creature it's inspiriting in response, so it's difficult to interact with. And if you kill the Inspirit creature, then the creature it had been exiling flickers back. If you counter the Inspirit creature when it's on the stack, it also flickers the target creature back. So it's just very difficult to interact with, and it creates a lot of value, particularly if you have ways to flicker it. The classic way of doing this was with Lazer's Conjuring, which was usually a 2-of in these decks. Once you get to late game, you flicker all your stuff, you get ridiculous amounts of value and often just win. But now you can also do it steadily near the beginning and in the mid game, just accruing a large amount of value. And if you're getting your stuff removed, if they're putting some pressure on, you're still generating a lot of card advantage over your opponent. And that's usually by these classic ETBs. Acidic Slime is a 1-of, can be very good. You can just start destroying a land every turn with Talia, which is very powerful. It's a bit situational though, so it's a 1-of. Croakfolk Troubadour is just a Elvish Visionary. There's another one. I think it's split so that they can dodge Banish, which removes all creatures of the same name from the board, hand, graveyard, and deck. So some redundancy in that way. Elvish Spirit Caller is very versatile. You can get back important things, like if they kill your Talia, you don't have another one, you can just return one and then later play your Talia to keep getting things back or bouncing their things they have in play. A classic Custard card. We went over Contra. It does a similar thing to Spirit Caller. You're getting things back. You can often just kind of cycle these through, particularly if you use a Spirit Caller ETB and then you inspirit it with Contra for 2 mana on the following turn. You can just, it's just very difficult to break through that value. Master of Marble Row is an amazing flicker target. It's from the more recent set, Scriptures of Urshad. It doesn't do the classic white thing where it makes an O-ring, but the creature is the O-ring, so if you kill the creature, you also get the thing back that they O-ringed. This creates a separate token that is the O-ring. And so they have to remove that token. And even if they do, you still have this 3/4 body, which is respectable on many boards. And occasionally you can make a monument to find a win sometimes. If you need to win in a turn and you happen to have enough creatures out, since this is a pretty heavy creature deck, creature heavy deck, I should say. Sometimes it's correct to get the monument instead of just removing their stuff. But what's notable is the fact that if you're doing the Cloister, which is correct most of the time, the Cloister enchantment token, you can flicker Talia and it doesn't flicker the Cloister. You're just adding more Cloisters to the board if you're flickering Master of Marble Row with your Talia. So this gets a lot better with Talia, and it was already a great card. Hantarachi Emissary is a classic in Spirit target because it cares about leaving the battlefield. Opponents don't want to remove it. It is just a 1/1, so they can safely ignore it for a while, but if you're using Counter of Old Magic on it, or Talia on it, you're going to be getting a lot of mana pretty quickly, which lets you, with all of this card recursion you're getting, get out of control. Serpent Dancer Contra combo's great with Emissary. You just jumpstart your mana quite a bit. Also good just for hitting your visionaries and things like that. And then if they want to remove your ramp, you also get cards. Tempered Ankulum is just a very flexible creature to have. And also, if you're flickering, you can use Talia on Tempered Ankulum to stay in the game against aggro. Just keep gaining 3 life. Or if you need to finish a game, you can flicker after you attack and deal damage to deal an additional 3 damage. Very flexible, great card. Taken for Questioning is a new O-ring effect from Netropolis, and it has basic O-ring text, except with superiority, the thing doesn't immediately come back when Taken for Questioning is removed if you happen to have more life than your opponent. So if you take something and you can maintain your life to be higher than that opponent, then you can flicker your Taken and just take more stuff every turn, and the other things remain exiled as long as you are still ahead. And so this can really snowball a game completely into your control, and they won't have, like, all their permanents will be gone. They're non-land permanents. So that is something I kind of missed when I was looking at my Netropolis offerings. I have been looking at changing this already. I kind of don't like how it works. However, that's how it is now and how it's going to be, at least for like 6 weeks or however long. So this is a very creative abuse of that. So this deck creates a lot of value. It's resilient in many ways, and it can snowball very easily. So a very interesting deck by Soul Invictus and Occo and others who have been messing with these synergies with Talia and creatures along Get Flickered. So that's something cool and new. The last deck was one that I played against and was very amused by when I played against it. Like, I lost, but it was very clever. I liked it a lot, and it's Black-Red Tradition. I played against AllWhoWander, and he said that the deck was inspired by a similar thing from Fazzer. So credit to Fazzer for coming up with this idea, and AllWhoWander for this specific list that I'm using that I pulled from the deck building channel. So Tradition, this is a format all-star right now. It kind of spawned a lot of archetypes, mostly mid-rangey, where it has this saga mechanic, or discovery mechanic, I'm sorry, that's similar to sagas. You play it the first couple turns when you first play it, and then the beginning of your next turn, this thing happens. You mill yourself, you gain a few life. That helps a little bit with survivability, but not a lot. The real reason you play it is once you get to this level, you don't sacrifice it and get this effect. This becomes a static enchantment effect that you have, and you get crazy recursion. Now, often when you have Tradition, things that you are recurring are going to be, Master of Marbled Row, that card I showed you before, just like high impact permanents that immediately do things. This deck wants to replay different things, like Toxic Scrap Heap. This is a new card from Netropolis. It's a design I personally like a lot. I love those old artifacts from, what's it called? Mirrodin. Not Mirrodin, but, when it's Scars of Mirrodin. I kept wanting to say Shadows of Mirrodin. Shadows of Battlefield of Mirrodin. Anyway, so where I loved those artifacts where it would get value when you play it and value when you sacrifice it. So you never feel bad for playing it if you don't have a sack outlet, but it gets even better if you have some synergies for being able to sacrifice it. So immediately, its removal, it's overcosted removal. Paying 2 mana at sorcery speed to shock something is not great. It does give some artifact synergies, though. And if you have ways to sacrifice artifacts, you can also make them discard their cards. Now, if you can make them discard their cards at instant speed, that's even better. So instant speed sacrifice outlets that can sacrifice artifacts are great. Here's another discovery. Currency. It just makes you some treasure tokens, which is okay. Like, it's some temporary ramp. I think it's not as good as a lot of people think that effect is, but for some combo decks and some decks that want lots of mana very fast for like a big turn early in a match, maybe that makes sense. The real thing you want currency for in this deck is once you get to this level, you can sacrifice any enchantment to draw a card. So you get tons of value if you have enough mana to play this, shock a creature, even just getting rid of a token is great at this point, and then you sacrifice this to draw a card and make them discard a card. But you do this during their draw step. So they've drawn their card before they even get to their main phase and have a chance to play it, as long as it's not an instant. you can use currency to sacrifice it, and they have to discard the card they just drew. That's what happened to me when I was playing against this deck. I was like, okay, he's got a lot of currencies on board. He's got these toxic scrap heaps, but I just need to draw, my finisher. I just need to draw my reach. But anytime I draw something that could be useful, he would make me discard it immediately. I had one vehicle that was pretty big, but he had two creatures that could profitably trade with it. And so I was waiting for another creature, just one more threat. But anytime I drew a card, he had tradition in play, and he could keep playing Toxic Scrap Heap every turn, and then sacrificing it every one of my draw steps, so I'd have to discard the card I just drew. A lot of people hate that kind of gameplay, but this uses enough different pieces and relies on synergy enough that I was impressed by it, honestly. So currency isn't the only thing that can sacrifice scrap heaps. I mean, that's one of the ideal ways because it's instant speed, correct? We have Mecha Dragon, also from Netropolis, a good mid-range threat. If you have lots of mana to spend, this can just come in, give itself haste, and fire breathe an opponent down. But it has this kind of trinket text at the bottom where you can sacrifice any artifact for red mana. You can do that at instant speed during their draw step if you need to. Also, if this comes down, you have a bunch of treasure tokens. Well, I guess you could sacrifice them for mana anyway. But you could sacrifice artifacts for a big turn with Mecha Dragon to finish somebody off, is my point. Deadeye Shinobi is a really great follow-up to Toxic Scrap Heap. You play this, and maybe you get rid of a 2-drop, and then you can get rid of their 3-drop with Deadeye Shinobi and make them discard a card. That happened to me a few times. I was aggro. I was testing this black aggro deck that was not as good as I'd hoped it would be. And he was just removing everything I played and getting value on top of that. The Tempered Anculum is just, as I was saying before, very flexible and also offers artifact synergy if they really need to remove something or draw a card. Lazer's Altar also gives you some artifacts if you need it at the expense of giving them cards. Alternatively, most players just use this to give themselves cards and give them mana. If you're already on the loop of making them discard everything they draw, then you're fine with giving them mana because they have nothing to spend it on. But you do have to get to the point where they don't have cards in hand, which can take a while. But mid-range decks can get to that point more easily than most decks, I think. Particularly if you are getting a lot of value from these scrap heaps and making them discard their cards. You also have Trusty Patches, which helps get the card counts low, because you can make each player discard cards unless they sacrifice something. And it also can apply pressure over a longer game against control or what have you. And Sicknick is also a card that I think in this deck is mainly just used as a distress. It's a 2 mana. You cast it at sorcery speed. You immediately -2 and pick a card from their hand. Additionally, it's something you can loop with tradition. If you don't have a scrap heap in your yard for whatever reason, you can bring back Sicknick each of your turns, and if they were holding something up, you can remove it. Banish, just a great removal spell in these mid-range and longer game decks. If they have a threat that even once you remove, there's others in the deck that you'd have to deal with as well, you can just get rid of all of them. Very powerful card. It exiles, which is good against cards like Darkbreaker, Angel, other creatures that get value as long as they just go to the graveyard. So this was a very impressive mid-range deck. I'd probably change some things about it. Like, I disagree with almost everybody about Lazer's Altar, but other people swear by it. I could easily be wrong here. And I just like how all of the pieces come together. I won't pretend to explain the sideboard because I haven't piloted this deck myself. Flamestorm, you can probably guess where that goes in and where Sorin comes in. Into the Lion's Den, good against control, and Crest. I said I wasn't going to pretend to explain the sideboard, but now I'm doing it. Pithing Needle, good against vehicles, and Planeswalkers, Tormod's Crypt, good against tradition loops and graveyard decks and reanimation decks like Ismerge. So those were the 3 new decks that popped up this week as players and deck builders are kind of going through Netropolis, seeing what cards they want to build around and build with, and what they want to bring into the format. I thought these were worth highlighting. I'm excited about all the deck building and exploration that's going on. There are a few other decks that I've seen people mess with. I'm kind of waiting for a list to gel more for some of those, but hopefully I'll have videos of those next week. But thanks for watching, and if you have questions about getting involved in Custard, playing the format, I have some other videos on my channel that can explain that, and I'll have a link to the Discord channel that you can join that has lots of resources. Thanks for watching.